Also, I would like to greet our brothers and sisters from the plurinational state of Bolivia, also present. Brothers Ralph Gonzalez, greetings to him. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Prime Minister of Grenada, the youngest of all, Prime Minister Dixon Mitchell. And we embraced in St. Vincent the last time we saw each other there. And he's presiding the CARICOM. And Roosevelt Skerrit of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philippe Pierre, a young, very young leader. Philippe, solidarity greetings to you and also to Denzil Douglas for St. Kitts and Nevis, and Scarlett, a special guest in this meeting. So Antigua and Barbuda, Bolivia, Cuba, Dominica, Grenada, Nicaragua, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, Honduras as a special guest, ambassadors present here today, and from Caracas, Venezuela, I sent you warm greetings. The Bolivarian and rebellious Caracas faced with the empires. Today is August the 26th of August, Monday. Starting a very good week of work and very timely session, starting this week with this meeting. And welcome, Roosevelt Skerrit. And I think we are broadcasting this through Telesur. And there is also a broadcast through an alternative network. There are a number of YouTubers connected as well. We are also broadcasting through TikTok Live, Instagram, Facebook Live, and so on, and so forth. Telegram also, even though the chair of Telegram has been imprisoned as a result of this campaign of blackmail and trying to put pressure on the alternative social media in the world, and the abuse of power, persecuting people to submit them. I do not know if that screen over there, I do not know if those following us through Telesur, peoples of Nicaragua, Venezuela, Bolivia, and beyond, and the Caribbean in general, can see precisely this wonderful screen with all the members of the Alba-Tcp, which is the very core of dignity, sovereignty of the greater homeland. Well, we have received the solidarity, support, love from peoples and governments of the world. In this process where Venezuela is withstanding an imperialist attack of the global empire of the West, and an attack an onslaught, another attack. And if we say that this is another attack, we will tell in the truth. But also, we need to assert that this is not just another attack. This is a criminal attack. Our people have received an attack from all sides. We have confronted, we have stopped, and we have defeated with our constitution a cyber coup d'etat, a criminal and fascist attack. And this will contribute to the historical truth for those who want to stick to facts, those who cherish facts of historical truth. It is not the first coup d'etat attempt and imperial onslaught, but this one has very peculiar characteristics. On this occasion of this meeting, of the core members of the Alba-Tcp, the core of the courage and the true freedom of our hemisphere, it is not our intention to just go over the past and what have happened in the region. We only have to mention that, for instance, in 2002, Venezuela was the target of an attack that ended up with a coup d'etat. 11th, 12th, and 13th of April, a coup d'etat of the elites, of the oligarchies, financed, monitored, and directed by the empire presided over by George Bush. That coup d'etat that resulted in the kidnapping and assassination attempt against Hugo Chavez Frias, our president Hugo Chavez Frias, was considered the first media coup of history. And that's as this event was recorded. And the leaders of the coup were located in the TV channel in Caracas. All the coup leaders, the coup plotters, the private media and powerful media. Here we have young people who didn't go through that period. At that time, the media were the determining factor, and the headlines and the news were the main tools, and the TV sets at the household were essential, was a very powerful means of communication. So the coup d'etat against Commander Hugo Chavez was clearly an immediate coup d'etat organized by the oligarchs. And it was organized, recognized, and fully supported by the US administration and its allies of the time. And one of the main actors was Jose Maria Aznar, the head of the Spanish government, was the hound. The hound was Mr. Aznar. So it is, we don't like to compare the dogs to this fellow, because dogs are in general very kind creatures. But then the United States and the Spanish government recognized the spurious government of the time. And this government dissolved all the branches. The legislative, the National Assembly was dissolved. The Republican moral branch the electoral branch was dissolved as a result of that coup. It ousted the executive power branch, and this person was self-appointed president, and they also dissolved all the local governments, etc. And Venezuela was no longer a Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, a name that was approved with the passing of the Constitution. So it also just dissolved the Constitution. It removed the portrait of Simon Bolivar. However, 47 hours later, a popular military and national insurrection rescued the Constitution, rescued the branches of power, and restated, as the elections dictated, Hugo Chavez Frias as head of the government. That was a historical feat. And then we know what happened after that, because the attacks continued relentlessly. The attempt to assault power in Venezuela, to take a power by assault, to recolonize Venezuela, because it is not a matter of Venezuela of having a democratic alternative. No. We have only political leaderships representing the interests of the old oligarchy, and that have over the time become fascists. Years ago, we denounced this, and Commander Chavez, when he was alive, he mentioned the nascent fascist trends, denying the law, denying democracy. And that was after a killing of Venezuela and feeding hatred, trying to foster division among our nations. Well, from the left, some type of left wing, they criticized Chavez, saying that he was exaggerating the situation. Now, dear brothers and sisters, presidents, prime ministers, today it is clear that we are facing the resurgence of fascism. Some call it neo-fascism. Okay, let's say that it is a new type of fascism, but there is no doubt that this fascism is feeding on hatred, and it wants the destruction of the national state and the social rights, and it wants to handle the countries to the United States of America. There is no doubt. Today, in Europe, in South America, in the US, there is a rebirth of fascism. It is a reality. And we said this yesterday in a podcast. And I cordially invite you to follow this podcast in our YouTube channel. And it has to be translated into English so you can be aware of the content of this podcast. So, and there we explained the origins and the similarities between fascism, Nazism, Frankism, and how Mussolini, Hitler, Franco And we see the rebirth of the Nazi currents and the link between Mussolinism, Nazism, Frankism, and Nazism as a whole, as fascism, the connection between those forces and the monarchical powers and the US transnational capital. So those are historical truths fully demonstrated. So we see how fascism was a resurgent to the creation of the Soviet Union.
To the resurgence of the socialist and communist movement of Europe and the world, and the terrified reaction of the dominant classes of what we call here in Venezuela the last names. In some places of South America, they call them pelucones. This is no other thing than the great capital, multimillionaires, those who believe, who own our societies and our countries. Today, fascism, neo-fascism, the far right has researched by the hand of Elon Musk. Goliath has a face, has a name and a last name, and he has a great capital and great power. Elon Musk and his allies. He is the representation of the extreme streams and in the communication financial power. Those last names such as Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, etc., they believe that it is a time to take by assault the political power where they find the natural resources, where they find resistance forces, and to assault power even in what they call the first world, the United States, all of Europe. It is a debate, a current debate. And from Alba, we're not telling lies. We are providing evidence. We have enough historical evidence about these truths. I am just repeating these truths. This has been demonstrated. So in Venezuela, and I believe that also in other places, we are facing a cyber coup d'etat, a fascist coup d'etat carried out by criminals with criminal intent. The Venezuelan people in civilian, military, and police unity was able to contain and defeat in the first 48 hours, and we are consolidating our victory. Bolivia, dear brother, Lucho Arce, the president of the plurinational state of Bolivia, my embrace to the whole of Bolivia, our beloved Bolivia, the favorite daughter of liberator Simón Bolívar. In Bolivia, they already tried this in 2019, and Alba reacted. They tried to do it, and then they applied it in full here in Venezuela. A coup d'etat carried out in the streets by criminal groups, harassing the mayor's office, the main leaders, the families of President Evo Morales back then, his ministers. And it was also combined with groups which unfortunately betrayed their role in the police forces, in the military forces. They tried to attack the entirety of the state. They assaulted power, they assaulted the state, and it filled with violence the Bolivian society. It was like a kidnapper, a criminal that takes your money with a gun to your head. It was similar to that. President Lucho, comrades President Diaz-Canel, prime ministers of the Caribbean. In Venezuela, we saw this campaign before July 28th. On July 28th and after July 28th, with the objective of imploding with violence of criminals who were hired and trained for this, to take Venezuela to a state of generalized violence and to a pre-civil war. They wanted to take Venezuela to a complete confrontation. And then they wanted to ask for intervention. Not a diplomatic intervention, a military intervention. That is the plan that was denounced by Commander Hugo Chavez on February 29, 2004, in the monumental highway Gran Cacique Huaycaipuro before Venezuelans, when he declared the anti-imperialist character of the Bolivarian Revolution in 2004. 20 years ago. So how many times have they tried to execute this coup d'etat? This is why this summit is so timely, because it is full of bravery, of courage, of truth, of our American patriotism, of Bolivarian vision, anti-imperialist vision. And also, it is a summit that will allow us to ratify the deep nature of our union from solidarity and from mutual support. On behalf of the Venezuelan people, I thank my brothers and sisters of the Bolivarian Alliance for the People of Our America and the peoples and governments of Latin America and the Caribbean, all of the support that we are receiving, the effective diplomatic political support, moral, spiritual support, active solidarity, the voice that is rising all over the world to warn of this aggression against Venezuela. Venezuela is at peace. We are consolidating our path. We are consolidating our constitution, all of our constitutional rights guaranteed for our people. Here we have over 100 social leaders, intellectuals, political leaders from around the world. They have come from Africa, from Asia, from the United States, from Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe. They are here. And why do we have international overseers in Venezuela? Because yesterday we had an election in Venezuela. Nobody knew about this in the world because we are not being seen. You can only see the news in the social media and international media that are going to challenge Venezuela, that will justify the hatred against Venezuela in the world, to justify interference in Venezuela. And this is the truth. But in Venezuela, yesterday, we had a popular party because we had the second public national consultation with the communal councils and the communes, so that the people would go to vote as they did for their priority projects for public investments in over 4,000 communal circuits where people participated. I was telling everyone that is here today that this is what we can call how do we call it when there is a war? The casus bellis, right? In international law, they call it that. Well, I would say that this is the casus bellis for imperialist aggression of the oligarchies and the neo-fascist right against Venezuela. Because in Venezuela, we are consolidating the path started by Commander Hugo Chavez to build a new democracy, new paradigms, direct democracy, democracy for the people, a true democracy, a new formula that has been joined by the Bolivarian doctrine, by the Chavista doctrine, by our experiences and our roots. As the great master Simon Rodriguez said, we are not a copy of anyone. We are not a copy. And Mariátegui also said this: socialism, our American socialism, shall not be a copy of anyone or anything. It should be a heroic creation. It is the heroic creation of a people that is struggling, that wants peace and wants democracy. This is a great example of new democracy, direct democracy, democracy for the people, radical and socialist democracy. But it is hidden. It is shut off. It doesn't exist for anyone else. But we say from Venezuela that no matter how many times we are attacked, we don't care about threats. We don't care that we are not visible. What matters is that the Venezuelan people exists and it's struggling and is victorious. Venezuela is in victory, brothers and sisters of Alba. Now you already have the documents. They are being circulated. It is a protocol of these kinds of summits so that we adopt common positions via consensus so that we can write the new history. And via Telesur and the media in each of our countries and the social media, we are going to give the floor to our comrades of the Bolivarian Alliance. They're telling me that we are going to start with the President of the Republic of Cuba, the bigger sister of the Caribbean, Miguel Mario Díaz-Canel Bermúdez. Welcome, you have the floor. Dear President and brother Nicolás Maduro, dear brothers, esteemed representatives of the nations that are members of our alliance, dear Jorge Arreaza, Executive Secretary of Alba-Tcp, brothers of our America. First of all, on behalf of the General of the Army, General Castro Ruz, leader of the Cuban Revolution, of the Government Party and the government of Cuba, we reiterate the congratulations already expressed after the first results were published to the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, our comrade Nicolás Maduro Moros, for his victory in the election of July 28th. Right now, we are joined by awareness and by solidarity, because I do believe that we are and we share this idea. We are very aware of the great danger that we have in the unitary project that represents this alliance and in the value of the solidarity confirmations that have been given by all of us to Venezuela, the indisputable leader of regional independence since the times of Bolivar and the Liberation Campaign. And today it is facing a discrediting campaign that is trying to mask another attempt of coup d'etat. They have tried so many times that it is no longer possible to hide their purposes under the pretext of making transparent the electoral results before the time that has been established for this. While, on the other hand, they do not challenge the incivilized, violent, and fascist position of a sector of the opposition that is refusing to accept everything that does not benefit it. The positions assumed by those political groups, saying that they would not recognize any other results that were not published by them, it showed very early that a new stage of all the previous and failed attempts to overthrow the legitimate governments were coming with a combination of internal violence and foreign intervention. This is the intention of those who want to validate some results using an electoral platform that is foreign to the legal power, to the legal electoral branch. If we accept this, we would take the electoral systems to non-functioning because parties cannot become arbitrators in a contest that involves them. In Cuba, in our country, our people recognizes and admires the serene response, the high sense of democracy, and the institutionality, as well as the vocation of peace demonstrated by President Nicolás Maduro and his team when responding to those provocations, supported by mobilizations of the people and by this electoral appeal in the electoral chamber of the Supreme Court of Venezuela, supported by the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Hours ago, the Supreme Court of Justice, after a revision of every document presented by the different political parties that participated in the election, issued an uncontestable sentence that confirms the victory of President Nicolás Maduro in the election of July 28 of this year. As it was expected, those who didn't recognize the official results and who didn't obey the orders of the Supreme Court started to attack and to deny the legitimacy of the tribunal and as well of the Constitution. The will of the majority shall be respected. The Venezuelan people voted fully aware in favor of dignity, of sovereignty, and for peace. And that vote has been endorsed with massive people's demonstrations all around Venezuela, even if those facts are being silenced with biased reports, which are openly for the opposition in the Western media that serve the empire. It is not the first time that American imperialism and the regional oligarchies show the rejection for the will of the people in our countries. It is not the first time that they try to stop political processes that go against their interests, because these processes favor the well-being of our people and the defense of our natural resources. It is not possible to be indifferent to this. Before this calculated union of oligarchies, imperialism, the big media, and the digital platforms against Venezuela. Today it is against Venezuela, but tomorrow it will be against any of our countries and our peoples. Today they try to annul the branches of power established by the Constitution and replace them by parallel institutions with very doubtful documents which are presented as legitimate. Those from abroad taking advantage of this situation to favor their political interests exacerbate, promote, and encourage destabilization, and they are the same, trying to demand evidence as an excuse to deviate attention from the political failure and try to delegitimize their movements in their own countries with accusations of foreign intervention. With absolute irresponsibility, they want to return to their plans of destabilization in Venezuela, and we cannot allow this in our America. In Venezuela, conflicts are resolved between the visions of the world, which are clearly in struggle. On the one hand, we have the emancipating vision, defending social justice for all, and on the other hand, we have the interest to preserve the system of injustice and hegemonies that the Bolivarian Revolution has been brave enough to confront. I remember that in January 2014, all of the heads of state of government of CELAC adopted the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. No imperial force or finance by the hegemony will make us go back in our responsibility to keep peace in our region. This is a vital cause which we will always work for. Dear brothers and sisters, today in 2024, we meet in this 10th Extraordinary Summit of Alba-Tcp to denounce the attempt of coup d'etat against the plurinational state of Bolivia. And we meet again in these very dark circumstances to condemn the foreign intervention against the homeland of Bolivar, which is our homeland, and against the unity of our America. The 24th Ordinary Summit to take place on December in Havana, which will coincide with the 20th anniversary of the funding of Alba-Tcp, will be a new opportunity to ratify the commitment to the defense of peace and sovereignty in the face of the new attempts of the empire to interfere in the internal affairs of our countries. These are times of unity and firmness against imperialism and against the oligarchies who will take the smallest chance to destroy the policies, the justice, and the dreams that have been conquered. We denounce the continuity of imperial harassments, foreign intervention, the attacks of oligarchies, and the media and political manipulation to generate destabilization, to overthrow the legitimate Bolivarian and Chavista governments. Cuba reiterates its condemnation against the systematic aggression against Venezuela and repudiates any act of violence to destroy the peace that is required by its noble and brave people to restore the deep damage caused to its economy with the criminal policy of sanctions and blockades used by the United States as the main weapon against the nations who are not submitted to their designs. It is up to us to be honest and to be just by respecting the principles of international law and the most elementary standards of coexistence. It is for Venezuelans to resolve the problems that they have, but will we not be in silence in the face of violations and the intervention of the empire, its allies, or those who will remain quiet. We will always stand in solidarity with the people of Venezuela and with our comrade Nicolás Maduro. We will always defend everything that is defended by the people of Venezuela with its vote, which has been punished by unfair unilateral coercive measures and in the midst of very adverse circumstances has achieved with great work the economic and social rebirth of the nation. Unity is the foundation of the invincible force of the peoples in revolution. Cuba knows, respects, and admires the civilian military units of Venezuela, and it trusts that the homeland of Bolivar, Chavez, and Maduro will continue to demonstrate that it can fight against any threat and any harassment until victory forever. Thank you. Greetings. We are very thankful for the clear, brave, and firm position of Cuba. The Cuba of Antonio Maceo, of Fidel, Raúl, the Cuba of the great apostle José Martí, who lives here in Caracas. The brave are those who transcend, those who do not submit to threats, those who do not look aside when a brother is being attacked, those who embrace their brothers in the times of difficulties, in bad times, in good times. And in Alba, Cuba has always set the example of courage, of loyalty, of the beauty and spirits of the men and the women of our sister Republic of Cuba. Thank you very much for your remarks. As the diplomat said, we have taken note of these beautiful words. That's how foreign ministers speak. I was a foreign minister, and so we have taken note of the firmness and the clarity of Cuba's spirit. Now we will give the floor to the South of America, in the heart of South America, to that land who loved Bolivar and who Bolivar loved, who loved Antonio José de Sucre and who Antonio José de Sucre loved. The land of Tupac Amaru, of Bartolina Sisa, the heroic land of our sister republic, plurinational state of Bolivia. President Lucho Arce, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Brother Nicolás Maduro, elected President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We take this opportunity to greet the President, Head of State of our great family of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America, the People's Trade. We are meeting a few months after the 20th anniversary of the creation of Alba-Tcp, at the moment when Latin America and the Caribbean are the theater of who struggle for power between those who love the region and those who want to preserve their privileges. We are at the moment where the threat of fascist threat is the reality. That is why this is the right moment to ratify our support to this mechanism of political consultation premised on the principles of solidarity, social justice, cooperation, and economic complementarity that has fostered the development of our peoples. The invitation to meet today reminds me the 20th summit held in Havana, Cuba, December the 14th, 2021. And I would like to quote the third item discussed in that meeting. We ratify our commitment to truly Latin American integration and Caribbean integration, to face together the domination pretensions of the West hegemon and the growing threat to peace, stability in the region. At that moment, as today, there was a need to strengthen our unit, to preserve the sovereign integration, which is one of the main pillars of this alliance. Then, as today, it is essential to work on the basis of our differences, encourage unity among diversity, protecting our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and to settle the all situation through the proper means, and do not intervene in the internal affairs of our countries and respect our sovereignties. This hybrid warfare that is deployed against us over the last month has been unleashed against Venezuela through a campaign of disinformation and discredit against the government of Nicolas Maduro, which is endangering the peace and stability of the Venezuelan people. These actions were intensified as a result of the presidential elections because of the hate narrative and a fake narrative of that there have been problems with the election in order to undermine the people's will expressed in the boxes, in the polling boxes. There were elections on the 28th of July, and the result has been recognized by other parties of the opposition in Venezuela, and that is a democratic practice. These actions are far from being new, and none of our country are exempt from suffering them. Imperialism is determined to recover hegemony on the backyard. Therefore, our country rejects any attempt of destabilization that could endanger the peace and the development of the Venezuelan people and of any of the members of our alliance. Violence cannot become a political practice in our region, and much less supplant the people's will expressed in the polling box. The intervention in the internal affairs of the countries, endangering the institutions and the sovereignty of our countries, regardless of the origin, contribute to endanger our integrity and unity. And it also is a threat to the peace in the region. We received recently the decision made by the Venezuelan High Tribunal, which is validating the result of the polls. Bolivia welcomed this decision. We ratified the will of the majority of the people and the strength of the Venezuelan institutions. We take this opportunity as well to reiterate our congratulations to our brother, President Nicolas Maduro, and we are certain that the wisdom of the people and under his wise ruling, this will give rise to stability, peace, and prosperity to the sister nation of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We need to be very attentive and on the plans who have been devised to undermine the peace in Venezuela. It is not democratic to try to dictate from abroad what this country should do. We need to work together to foster the good life of our peoples in the region. In these difficult times, we need to make reality the words of José Martí in his essay, Our America. It is time to march together, and we need to walk in a very united fashion as the plants, at the roots of our plants in the regions Andes. And we will be walking together, as you say, brother, following in the footsteps of Martí, the greatest Bolivarian that existed in the 19th century in the region, the greatest one of all. In the 20th century, we had Fidel and Chavez, of course. Bolivar is setting the path in the region. You were able to defeat a coup d'etat that resulted in the assassination on hundreds of Bolivian people in El Alto, Cochabamba. The fascists took power. They assaulted power in Bolivia. And a woman just was a self-proclaimed president, and immediately the European Union and the United States recognized that government, and the coward government of the right in the region that also participated in this process, because we knew that Macri provided money and weapons for the coup d'etat in Bolivia. Bolsonaro sent an aircraft that took this spurious coup leader to take her to Brazil. So the fascist right, they work together and they follow the rules of their master. So the whole right that recognized the coup d'etat in Bolivia was the very same right that in 2019 said that in Venezuela the president was Juan Guaido. Do you remember this movie from Netflix, the series The Narnia President? This famous series in Netflix. In Colombia, they recognized Guaido and they recognized the coup leader in Bolivia. In Chile, the late Piñera recognized those fake leaders, and he came to Colombia to try to invade Venezuela. And Macri also recognized these coup leaders. The group of Lima, remember? Presidents, prime ministers, the group of Lima, remember that group? Today extinct and defeated, pulverized. As Diaz-Canel said recently in its X account, and he was, remember, those who attack Venezuela, they dry out, they disappear, they're pulverized. I don't know how they say that in English, but they're trying to find another translation for this. Those who attack Venezuela, they disappear, they become dust. And I recommend you, I do not know if we have an English version of this book, The Mainstream Fascism, wrote by Censo from Valencia, Spain in 2019. He published this book, and this is a very good book. And I could send this book to you. It was published in my social media. Well, in this book, he precisely tells the story of the coup attempt in Venezuela. He doesn't talk about Venezuela, he talks about the world. However, he mentions these attempts. The title is Mainstream Fascism, and the subtitle is Journalism, Conspiracies, Algorithms, and Bots in the hands of the right. And who is the owner of internet and the major social media in the world? Elon Musk. He is the owner of the main social media. I'm talking about Goliath. Elon Musk is the Goliath. However, Alba-Tcp has the strength of David against Goliath. Fascism. Fascism in Venezuela, as it's been clearly demonstrated, they do not recognize the electoral branch. They ignore the judiciary. They ignore the office of the prosecutor, and they ignore the constitution. And it is not the first time. In 2002, they just destroyed and made all the branches of power disappeared. They think that with their surnames, they think they're above the law. That's the essence of fascism. The fascism of the past and the fascism of the 21st 21st century. So thank you very much, President Lucio. Convey to all the social movements in Bolivia, from Caracas, Venezuela, the framework of the Bolivarian Alliance of the Peoples of South America, our love. We love Bolivia, we love South America, and we will continue working together and in permanent victory, brothers and sisters.
Bueno, vamos a recibir con mucho amor, mucho honor.
Now, we want to give the floor to a leader of the Americas, of the peoples of the South, a leader with the moral authority, the experience, and the wisdom that recently handed out the head of the chairmanship of CELAC recently, and he's going to take the floor because the 6 members of Alba-Tcp of the Caribbean have chosen him to take the floor on behalf of the people of the streets, of the peoples of the Caribbean. So I would like to give the floor to Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Brother, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, colleagues. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon at this 11th Extraordinary Summit of the Heads of State and Government of Alba-Tcp. I want, on behalf of all of the 6 independent member states of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, which countries constitute individual members of Alba-Tcp, want on their behalf to reiterate our full satisfaction on all the processes which delivered the result in the re-election of Nicolas Maduro as the constitutionally elected president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The countries of Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, within 2 days of the re-election of Nicolas Maduro as president of Venezuela, we issued a joint statement about this election and congratulated him on his electoral triumph. I want also to say, on behalf of all these 6 countries, that we support the draft declaration of this summit. The matters which we are considering today are fairly straightforward if you have a dispassionate mind and that you're interested in truth and in justice. First of all, the national law of Venezuela and all its processes, including the conduct of the elections by the Electoral Council and the validation of the results by the Supreme Court upon proper inquiry, the electoral chamber of the Supreme Court. This determination by the constitutional legal authorities within Venezuela, in the presence of large numbers of international observers, including from the Caribbean, including from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All of this would normally satisfy any objective, rational group of persons or states. And international law would support what had been done, what has been done in Venezuela through the national, legal, constitutional authorities. Of course, not everybody is rational, and not everybody is disinterested. And the fact of the matter is that the history in the hemisphere has shown, this hemisphere, that the United States of America has a history of conducting itself in a manner which is inconsistent with its own declared principles on which its own republic is based. And in the case of Venezuela, the ruling class in the United States of America has been interested in owning Venezuela's oil and other resources and to dominate Venezuela and Latin America and the Caribbean. The ghost of Monroe has yet to be exorcised from the body politic of the United States of America. St. Vincent and the Grenadines and all the countries of the Caribbean, CARICOM, in the OECS, regard the United States of America as their friend. And the United States of America is a country of great promise and great achievement. But yet, it has this imperial blind spot that repeatedly shows its conduct in Latin America and the Caribbean to be inconsistent with its own ideals. I'm not talking about what takes place inside of the United States of America. I'm not interfering in their affairs. I'm talking about their conduct in relation to the Caribbean and Latin America. So the national law and international law and the reality and the facts on the ground are in favor of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on any objective analysis of all the circumstances and all what has taken place. History has taught us on these matters not to trust the word of the United States of America, and they have no high moral ground to teach us anything about holding elections and about having governments determined by our own people. The record is clear. I was born in 1946. And for all my years on earth, the United States of America has repeatedly interfered in the business of Latin America and the Caribbean, not in favor of people, but in favor of the interests of the ruling classes in that country. The examples are legion. In 1953, United States of America, under President Dwight Eisenhower, overthrew a social democratic and nationalist government in Guatemala, the Arbenz government. In 1961, it led the campaign at the Bay of Pigs against Cuba and the Cuban Revolution and the Cuban people. And since then, has sought at every turn to undermine and derail the Cuban Revolution. In 1971, it engineered with the military in Chile to set up a fascist government under Pinochet, military dictator, overthrowing the legitimately elected government of Salvador Allende. In the 1980s, its role against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, a democratically elected government. From 1997 onwards, its attempt to subvert the institutions and to gain control of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Hugo Chavez was the duly elected president in 2002 when the Americans, as soon as the right wing carried out a coup against Chavez, the American government supported and recognized that government promptly until the people of Venezuela very swiftly decided that they will not allow such a counter-revolution to stand. In Honduras, in 2009, they connived with the right wing, the reactionary class, the pro-imperialist groups within Honduras to overthrow a legitimately elected government. In that country, in Honduras, Melez, our brother, the husband of the current president of Honduras, was overthrown, President Zelaya. In Bolivia, a very ingenious coup d'etat carried out in connivance and with the support of Almagro at the OAS. They carried out a coup, an ingenious one, by the way of an electoral observer mission. These are the broad historic facts. In Venezuela, oil and imperialism go together as far as the Americans are concerned. They want to control the oil industry in Venezuela, and they also want to control Guyana's oil from Caracas, if ever the right wing were to come to power in Caracas. And everybody who understands the history of our country, our region, and the behavior of the ruling class, not the ordinary people in the United States of America, the ruling elites, they want to control the oil, and they want to control it within their own interests. I repeat that the United States of America has no lesson to teach us in relation to elections. My country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and all the other OECS countries for which I'm speaking here today, that we have a competitive electoral system like that of Venezuela, and we produce free and fair elections, and our governments are being elected in accordance with our national laws, just as Maduro's government was legitimately elected in free and fair elections. So, on the basis of national law, on the basis of international law, on the basis of the facts on the ground, on the basis of our own historical understanding as the United States in relation to Latin America and the Caribbean, we are on the right side. And I'm appealing to the Americans to cease this hostility against Venezuela and Cuba, or any country which seeks to resist imperialism. I'm asking the countries in Europe not to follow blindly what the Americans are talking about. What the networks in the United States, controlled by the very elites, with all their crisscrossing ownerships in companies internationally. It's part of monopoly capitalism extended overseas. The vast majority of countries in the world and the bulk of the peoples of the world recognize the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We should not be going through this charade as we have been going through over the last several years. The people of Venezuela deserve better. Not to be harassed and vilified at every single turn. These unilateral, illegal sanctions, which weaponize the financial system, which are crippling Venezuela. The report of the rapporteur of the United Nations in 2021 makes that clear. The evidence is there, well documented. And our journalists in the Caribbean and Latin America, our researchers, our professors, our intellectuals, our leaders must call this out. I am not making any argument here against the American people. I'm not calling for any overthrow of any government in the United States. I want us to maintain friendship with the United States. But it must cease to interfere willy-nilly in the business of the governments and peoples of the region. It must, I repeat, exorcise this evil spirit of Monroe. It still pervades American foreign policy. This year they have elections, presidential elections. And they're all playing to the gallery and playing to the votes in South Florida. And Florida is an important state in the presidential elections. Venezuela must not be made a prisoner of imperialism and American presidential elections. Daily, they harm Venezuela as in fact they harm Cuba. And I'm asking, I'm pleading, I'm calling on them to stop it. It is wrong. In my church, in my religion, the Roman Catholic Church, sin is divided in two categories: mortal sin and venial sin. Mortal sins are the real serious sins, like murder. Well, their policies, the policies of the American elites, the American ruling class, those policies are daily killing Venezuelans and Cubans because of these blockades, because of these unilateral illegal sanctions. I speak love and friendship for the United States of America. But they must cease, the government must cease this relentless war against Cuba and Venezuela, and to put aside this awful sin they have been committing against the Venezuelan and the Cuban people. I reiterate our support for this declaration. I will not be here for the whole of the meeting because I have another meeting, but I'm very happy to have been given the opportunity to speak and to speak on behalf of the rest of the OECS. I look forward to seeing my brother Nicholas in flesh at the soonest opportunity. Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines are at the moment very busy seeking to rebuild our countries after this awful hurricane, this devastating Hurricane Beryl. We call on all the North Atlantic powers, United States, Canada, Western Europe. Please, make your peace with Venezuela and with Cuba. Let justice prevail. Let's decency. Respect the laws and the constitutions of these countries and cease the subversion through all nefarious means. It is wrong. International law. It is wrong before man and God. St. Vincent and the Grenadines remains in solidarity with the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and with President Maduro, while at the same time, we retain and build our friendship with the United States of America, but urge the American elites to clear this terrible blind spot and live up to your own nation's ideals when you leave your borders. Thank you.
Nos alegra mucho verte y escucharte.
Well, we are very glad to see you and to hear you, dear brother, dear teacher, Ralph Gonsalves, the voice of courage and Latin America, Caribbean dignity, the deep voice of a Caribbean that bets for unity, for peace, and for the independence of the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. The times of slavery and colonialism has ended. They will not come back, and the times of fascism will be defeated. Here in Latin America and the Caribbean, fascism will not pass. It will be defeated. It will be pulverized by the strength of our peoples, here, there, and everywhere. Ralph, it is a very important this about Bolivar. As you know, he talked about this in 1829 after knowing the conduct of the ancient 13 colonies that were then constituted into a republic, the United States of North America, in the area of New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, the Northeast area. When the United States was created, when they became independent from the ancient colonies of Spain, the United States was geographically and from a population point of view only a small state. But the elites who built the United States were born with the genes of the British Empire. And so the first steps they took always had an expansionist vision. First, they expanded towards the West, the conquest of the West. This meant a genocide of the indigenous peoples. They confined these indigenous populations to national parks, and then they were expelled from those areas. Slavery was alive until the time of Muhammad Ali, until the Black Panthers. And then they took half of the Mexican territory. They stole half of the Mexican territory. Everything that is close to Texas, Arizona, up to California. And so they created the territory that then in the 20th century was the empire of the United States, the American empire. But Bolivar in 1829, in one of his many documents, he was a prophet. Even before Charles Marx and Lenin, he said the following: the United States of America seem destined by Providence to plague the Americas with misery in the name of freedom. This was his prophecy. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Commander Chavez said, unfortunately. In the name of freedom, they executed the coup d'etat against Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. And then in the name of freedom, they executed another coup d'etat against Joao Goulart in 1974. Then in the name of freedom, they invaded and they massacred the people of the Dominican Republic in 1965. In the name of freedom, they overthrew and they murdered President Salvador Allende, the great martyr of Chile. In the name of freedom, they made a contract to massacre, torture, and murder the people of Nicaragua so that they were not able to consolidate the historical project in the 80s. In the name of freedom, they invaded Panama and they massacred 3,000 men and women who were sleeping in their houses in the Chorrillo neighborhood in Panama City. I was there and I knew the families, I knew orphaned children. Their mothers and fathers were massacred by the United States, and Panama today is governed by the heirs of those who invaded Panama, cowards, and all of this in the name of freedom. They also invaded Grenada. In the name of freedom, they executed the coup d'etat against Mel Zelaya in Honduras. In the name of freedom, they executed a coup d'etat against Fernando Lugo in Paraguay. In the name of freedom, they have killed, invaded, in the name of freedom, with a false positive. They said that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they massacred and they killed 1 million of Iraqi people. and no one said anything. In the name of freedom, they invaded and destroyed our sister Libya in the north of Africa. In the name of freedom, for 20 years, they destroyed Afghanistan. And that's what Bolivar said, in the name of freedom. They were going to impose their projects in America, but they were beyond America. Bolivar's vision did not reach so far. And now, in the name of freedom, of course, they cannot say that in Venezuela we have weapons of mass destruction or nuclear missiles targeting the US, but they are imposing a narrative with threats to justify a fascist coup d'etat in Venezuela, a civil war in Venezuela, and an attempt to invade Venezuela. As simple as that. That is the satanic, demonic face that is mentioned by Ralph. That we need to talk to the US, to have dialogue with them. Well, we have done it, Ralph. That we need to be friends. Well, we have tried to be friends. But when we talk, they think that it is a gesture of weakness. Members of ALBA, you know this. I'm just reminding you. I welcome the visit of Juan Gonzalez, the Undersecretary of the White House for the Hemisphere, on March 5th, 2022. He wanted to ask oil from Venezuela because the war of Ukraine against Russia was just starting, of the Ukrainian fascism, Ukrainian Nazism. Then we made contacts, we had some agreements, and then in May 2023, until October 2023, we had negotiations to have an agreement of mutual respect, and we signed this agreement in Qatar. We signed this agreement with the Americans in Qatar, and I have already published the document with the signature of Brian Nichols, with the signature of Jorge Rodriguez. They were talking to us and they were signing the agreement, but they were trying to kill me. They tried to kill me 5 times in 2023. These were conspiracies that they prepared from Colombia. That is the face of imperialism. In 2024, right before the electoral campaign, they tried to kill me 4 times. I am not talking nonsense. All of the material authors and some of the intellectual authors of these murder attempts have been detained in 2023 and in 2024. They did not hold their word. They did not fulfill their agreements. If they are capable to use the negotiations to put a smile in our faces and then we forget about it and then they try to kill us, if they are capable to sign a document with a commitment, but they don't want to fulfill any of those commitments, what do you think they're going to do? This is the truth. And now they want to create a new trap. Here we have the grassroots movements, the hero of Cuba, Gerardo Hernandez. He knows very well everything I'm talking about because he was in prison in the jails of the empire. He was isolated and tortured for many years, dear Gerardo. You know very well every single one of these words. I look at you with admiration, with love, and I see on your face the truth of everything I'm saying because you were detained in the US after Fidel denounced to the Bill Clinton administration regarding plans of terrorist attacks against Cuba, which were being prepared in Miami, the capital of corruption. There are many honest people who live in Miami. We have many friends in Miami, but it is a hub of conspiracy, and that's the truth. So now they want to attack and they want to blackmail all of the governments of the world. They are blackmailing every government around the world because they have an objective, which is Venezuela. And they want to impose in Venezuela another Guaido type scenario. I already denounced this during the electoral campaign, and people were not believing. They said, no, this is only a speech for the campaign. But they want to repeat the Guaido type scenario once again. And I heard you, Ralph, every single word you said. I hope, or I wish, that the European Union governments had the independence that we have as modest governments of Latin America and the Caribbean in OBA. I wish they had a hair of dignity. So, not to repeat an expression of Fidel Castro Ruz, I wish they had a single hair of dignity. Because the European Union is on their knees. They are completely obeying the needs. Joseph Borrell and the European Union are not only against Venezuela, but they are also instigating and supporting a war against Russia from the Ukraine. They want to increase the war with the brutal consequences that this kind of war could have. It could become a nuclear war, and we all know this. Joseph Borrell supports the Palestinian Holocaust, the Gaza massacre. He is an accomplice of the Gaza massacre. And now he's aiming his weapons against Venezuela. Fortunately, we are united. I can say that we are prepared. We are in peace. And as our people say, in the face of every difficulty, we from Venezuela, with the friendship of our governments of the Caribbean, of our America, we will continue to be victorious and we will continue to defeat this new attack to chart the path for a future of peace, cooperation, and a shared future for all of us. I'm very thankful for this message, this powerful message of the Caribbean, supporting the rights to peace and developments of Venezuela. Now we're going to listen to another Central American leader. He is also setting an example in the different scenarios of every struggle. In Managua, Nicaragua, free territory of America, as Radio Havana, Cuba, you used to say. Managua, Nicaragua, we have Commander President Daniel Ortega Saavedra. You have the floor, comrade.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Hermanos bolivarianos, hermanos venezolanos.
Bolivarian brothers and sisters, Venezuelan brothers and sisters.
Buenos días, hermano presidente legítimo.
Greetings, legitimate president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros.
Sí, mucho hablamos en estos últimos tiempos.
In these times,
El fascismo
we talk a great deal about fascism and how it is re-emerging, how it is being strengthened.
me parece que
And it seems to me that fascism
no es que se haya iniciado.
it is not that it started.
El fascismo no se origina
Fascism does not originate
en Alemania ni
in Germany
en Italia ni en
or
España.
Italy or Spain.
¿Sí? Destacó porque
It is
fueron,
true
digamos,
that
puntos donde el fascismo
those were the points where fascism
se desenmascaró.
was unmasked.
El fascismo nace
Fascism was born
desde el momento en que
from the time
Darwin decía en el origen de las especies
Darwin said in The Origin of the Species
más fuertes
that
eran las que iban a
the
sobrevivir.
stronger ones were going to survive.
En el origen de las especies también está la especie
And
humana.
in The Origin of the Species, of course, we also find the human species.
Y la especie humana,
And the human species,
su tendencia fue a imponerse
had a trend to impose by force, impose itself by force.
desde los orígenes de la humanidad.
Since the origins of humankind,
Ahí estaba ya incubándose el fascismo.
we saw fascism already being incubated.
Y ya no digamos cuando, como parte de la civilización,
It was a part of civilization,
del desarrollo de los imperios,
of the developments of the empires.
de la Grecia,
We saw it in Greece, exemplary
de
Greece,
la Roma,
Rome.
se fueron dando manifestaciones.
We saw different manifestations,
Tanto más brutales
from the most brutal ones
que se dieron después.
to the ones that we saw later with Hitler, Mussolini,
Y el español.
and Franco.
¿Qué cosa es la esclavitud?
What is slavery?
Ya que la esclavitud es
Well, slavery,
los que instalaron la esclavitud,
those
los
who
que
installed
promovieron la
slavery,
esclavitud,
those who promoted
los
slavery,
que transitaron
those who
como
walked
esclavos
through life
de
with
África
slaves coming from Africa,
y que luego eran trasladados
who
a
then
Europa.
were taken to Europe.
Y en Europa estaban las grandes empresas
And in Europe,
francesas
there were the
disputando
great British and French
esa
companies
mercancía para trasladarla
fighting for that
a las
merchandise
regiones.
to take it to our regions or to their regions.
¿Quiénes fueron?
Who were those
Practicaron e instauraron el
who
fascismo
practiced and who
a través de la
installed
esclavitud.
fascism through slavery?
Ahí estaba ya estableciéndose como algo normal,
There we see the establishment as a normal
como
thing,
algo que se veía como un elemento que
something that was seen
enriquecía
as an
las
element
potencias
that would
imperialistas
enrich
europeas que a la vez se
the
disputaban
imperialist
entre ellas
superpowers from Europe
territorios en el mundo.
who were fighting with each other for territories around the world, for domination around the world.
Ahí estaba ya el fascismo.
Fascism was already there.
Y lo que se llamó después el desarrollo
And what was later called the development
de la libertad, de la democracia,
of freedom, of democracy,
cuando se produjo la gran revolución francesa,
when the French Revolution took
se
place,
produjeron cambios en Europa.
when we saw changes taking place in Europe.
Ahí se fue institucionalizando
At that point, we saw the institutionalization of fascism because European superpowers,
disputando siempre entre sí,
always fighting against each other,
los amos del planeta.
they became the masters of the
Como los
planet,
dueños de los continentes
the owners of the continents,
asiático,
of Africa, of Asia,
americano.
American.
A todo lo que llamamos fascismo, que fue el periodo
What we call fascism,
donde
which was the
el
period
europeo,
in
un
which
partido democrático europeo,
at
las prácticas
an European
democráticas europeas,
Democratic Party,
llevó a
according
Hitler a la
to
presidencia.
the practices of democracy in Europe,
Con
took
apoyo de las
Hitler
empresas
to the
norteamericanas.
presidency with the support of American companies.
Y luego Mussolini,
And then we saw Mussolini,
y luego
and then
el español
Franco.
Franco que destrozó
Franco
al pueblo español
completely destroyed the Spanish people.
y Franco enlazado con quién?
And Franco
Otro imperio.
was joined with another
Otro
empire,
imperio. Poderoso, que se vino conformando.
powerful empire,
Poderoso.
which
El Vaticano.
became a powerful empire, which is the
El
Vatican,
Vaticano fue cómplice.
because the Vatican was an accomplice
Cómplice
of the Nazis.
de los nazis en Italia, en Alemania.
They
en
were an
España.
accomplice of the Nazis in Italy, in Spain, in Germany.
En España incluso se dio un confrontamiento armado.
In Spain, there was even an arms confrontation
Católicos, cristianos,
of the Catholics,
manipulados.
Christians, who were manipulated
De la democracia.
to defend democracy.
Y ahí hubo una guerra.
And there was a war,
Una guerra. Como la guerra que se produjo tiempo después.
as the war that was produced years later in Mexico.
Los curas en
The
guerra
priests
contra
were at war
lo que eran
against
de avanzada.
advanced or progressive
Dando bala.
movements in Mexico.
Y no podemos cerrar los ojos a esa
So
realidad.
we cannot close our eyes to that reality,
Es un instrumento más.
because the Vatican is just another instrument
Batallas que estamos librando.
in
Es
all
un
of these
más
battles that we are fighting.
del
It's
conglomerado
just another tool that is a part of the great conglomerate of fascism,
que en nuevas modalidades quiere
which
dominar.
in new modalities wants to dominate the world, wants to rule the world.
Y como han venido dominando
And as they have been
América,
ruling,
es
they invaded America, and
500 años.
there were 500 years.
Como se logró la independencia gracias
But we achieved the independence
al heroísmo, al patriotismo
thanks to the heroism and the patriotism
de
and
Bolívar.
the courage of
Y no
Bolivar.
solamente de Bolívar,
And not only Bolivar,
señalando a quienes iban a manchar de sangre todos nuestros pueblos, los Estados Unidos.
because all of our peoples have been stained with the blood of our citizens. He defended the freedom of our peoples, Bolivar. And to the north of our America,
Llegaron los otros invasores.
we saw the arrival of the other invaders.
Invasores. Ellos no pidieron permiso para
They
llegar
didn't ask for permission
los británicos,
to go to Mexico, the British,
España,
or to
como
Spain.
Estados Unidos. Los españoles no pidieron permiso para
The
llegar.
Spaniards didn't ask for permission to come to America.
Los europeos que siguieron emigrando
The Europeans who continued to emigrate to the United States,
era asesinar
they were murdering
a los pueblos originarios,
the indigenous populations.
destruir
They destroyed their culture.
su formación de vida, su
They
desarrollo.
destroyed their way of living, their developments, as they did in our America.
Esas son prácticas fascistas,
And these are fascist practices.
fascistas. Que alentó, lógicamente, más a las potencias
This, of course,
imperialistas
encouraged even more
iban emergiendo
the imperialist
fuertes,
superpowers
más
who were becoming
a
stronger and stronger.
buscar el dominio
This encouraged them to seek
del mundo, del planeta,
the total domination of the planet
en nombre de la democracia.
on behalf of democracy.
Luego, yo iría pasando
And then,
por el mayor acto de terrorismo
including probably the biggest act of terrorism that has been committed in the world,
el lanzamiento de bombas atómicas en Hiroshima y Nagasaki,
which were the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
lanzadas tranquilamente por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos.
quietly launched by the US government and applauded, celebrated
Que en Europa
by the European governments,
se dicen democráticos.
the so-called democratic governments.
Fueron dos actos de terrorismo que produjeron muchos más muertes.
These two acts of terrorism caused more deaths and much more damage in the long term than the terrorist acts against the Twin Towers in New York. Because with the first bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were 250,000 people who died. And then the radiation, another 200,000 people died due to diseases caused by radiation. It was not an attack against a military base. It was a bomb falling on two peaceful cities which did not have military fronts. They did not attack military fronts. They dropped these bombs cowardly against the people to force Japan to surrender. Fascism and Nazism,
de la gran mentira que instalaron en el mundo.
after the great lie that they told all around the world
de que la democracia
that democracy
es la que debe reinar en el mundo.
should prevail in the world.
En nombre de la democracia ya se venían cometiendo
In the name
crímenes.
of democracy, they committed these crimes.
En nombre de la democracia
In the name of democracy,
se ha producido todos esos crímenes que nos enumeraba
all of these crimes
en el mundo.
mentioned by Nicolas have taken place.
Millones de muertos,
Invasions, thousands of millions of deaths,
con más de 2 millones
occupation
de
of nations with over 2 million
democrática
deaths,
Francia,
the so-called democratic France
democrática Francia.
occupying
No hay
Algeria.
democracia. No existe la
But
democracia
there is no democracy
tan pregonada en los países europeos
so loudly proclaimed
ni
by
en
European
de
countries
Norteamérica.
and in the United States of America.
Ahí, en todos estos países, los que dominan son
In all of these countries,
los intereses
what rules
económicos, militares,
is the economic, the military interests
de los que promueven
of those
prácticas fascistas
who
para
promote
terminar
these fascist
ese dominio.
practices to make their domination a reality.
Y entre ellos, entre las potencias, pues claro que hay sus rivalidades, pero al final
And of course,
se ponen de acuerdo.
there are rivalries among these superpowers, but in the end, they all agree on the
Los
same thing.
crímenes más horrendos lo estamos viendo todos los días.
The most horrendous crimes we see them every day in the media.
Que los que está
What
cometiendo el
most horrendous
gobierno
crimes that
judío.
those that are being committed by the Jewish
El pueblo judío
government?
nos merece
Because the
respeto.
Jewish people
El
deserves
pueblo
our
judío
respect.
fue víctima
The Jewish
también del
people
nazismo y del
was also
fascismo.
a victim of Nazism and fascism.
Son más de 6 millones de ciudadanos que fueron exterminados en los
Over
campos
6 million
de
people were
concentración
exterminated
de
in
los
concentration camps
países europeos
in European countries,
que en esa época eran democráticos, se
which
presentaban
at the
como
time
democráticos,
were presented as democratic.
donde gobernaba el Führer en
The
Alemania.
Führer
¿Cuántos campos de
was the
concentración
ruler, and how many concentration
en
camps
Polonia?
did they have
¿Cuántas
in
ciudades,
Poland?
campos de
In how
concentración?
many cities?
Y a pesar de tantos crímenes
And
de
in
tanta
spite of
brutalidad,
so many crimes and so much brutality,
la esclavitud, tal y como se practicaba en aquel
slavery, as it was
tiempo, ya
practiced at the
desapareció,
time, well, that slavery
desaparecido.
has disappeared.
Pero se han establecido nuevas formas para
But
encadenar
new
a los
forms
pueblos.
of slavery have been created to chain the peoples.
Y aquí en nuestra América,
And here in our America,
la práctica es
the praxis
el chantaje.
consists on blackmail.
El chantaje con agresiones económicas,
Blackmail,
con esas
including
sanciones que no son
economic
más que
aggressions,
sanciones
the so-called sanctions, which are no other than
de las
attacks
que le han aplicado a Cuba y le siguen aplicando a Cuba,
which have been
de las que
imposed
le han
against
aplicado a Venezuela y le
Cuba,
siguen aplicando a Venezuela,
against
a
Venezuela,
Nicaragua y le siguen
against
aplicando,
Nicaragua,
con las que le aplican, lo sabemos bien,
and we know this too well,
entendemos
and we understand
a los hermanos pueblos del Caribe
as these are applied against our brothers of the Caribbean, which are very fragile economies with difficulties for trade. There we see their blackmail. Even within ALBA, sometimes they have been forced to take positions that we do not share in this organization. And we understand. We understand this because they have a gun to their heads. And in our America, there is a new stage of liberation that started after the independence of Spain, after the heroic battles fought by the greatest leader of our America, Simon Bolivar. But the battles have continued. And the peoples have gained even more awareness. And peoples have also gained in value, in courage. They have identified with the struggles of those who gave everything to liberate their peoples. And this explains why after the wave of military coup in Latin America, promoted, organized by the Yankee imperialists and joined by European imperialists, and also celebrated by other Latin American governments. Even if our America was oppressed by them. We saw the revolution of Cuba 61 years ago. It was a light in the darkness, which gave even more strength, more courage to our peoples. And then we saw the Sandinist revolution. It was a battle that cost over 100,000 deaths in 2 stages. First, the battle against Somoza, who was maintained by the Yankees. He had Yankee troops in Nicaragua. And that battle started with the murder of Sandino in 1933. Up to 1979. Thousands of people died. Thousands of people were murdered because the example of Sandino did not diminish the Nicaraguan people. The people started to fight battles, struggles on their own sides. There were Sandinist generals, 70 years old, organizing their troops, and they died fighting in Nicaragua. It was a very long battle. and then the crimes of Somoza.
Luego,
And later,
una lección que aprendimos nosotros ahí.
and we learned a great lesson from all this.
Con el imperialismo no hay forma de negociar.
With imperialism, there is no way to negotiate.
Porque el imperialismo cuando busca cómo negociar,
Because when imperialism wants to negotiate,
todo sea para él.
it wants to take everything.
Destruir al
And
gobierno.
if they can get everything,
Busca cómo
they
matar
try
al
to
gobierno.
destroy. They want to destroy the government. They want to kill the leaders. And I was telling Ralph
El acto del 44 aniversario
during the 44th anniversary of the Sandinist Revolution,
que conversáramos con los Estados Unidos, que buscáramos entendimiento.
Ralph was telling me that we should establish dialogue with the US to look for an understanding.
En Nicaragua,
And I told him that Nicaragua,
los yanquis han invadido
that in Nicaragua, the Yankees have invaded
desde el año 1850.
starting in 1854.
Ahí no hubo negociación.
And there was no negotiation.
Fue una unidad
What we saw
americana porque se dieron cuenta que los yanquis
was a Central American unit because they realized that the Yankees were coming all across Central America.
a William Walker, reconocido
And they had a Yankee president, William Walker, in Nicaragua, recognized by the State Department.
centroamericana,
So there was a whole Central American unit
mucho arrojo, mucha valentía.
and a lot of courage.
El pueblo logró derrotar
And the people was able to defeat
invasión de los
that
expansionistas.
first invasion of Yankee
Luego,
expansionism.
en el año 1970,
But then in
1877
in 1877,
había un gobierno liberal,
there was a liberal government.
no le hacía caso a los yanquis.
He did not listen to the
El
Yankees.
pecado del gobierno liberal era
So the sin of this liberal government
europeo
was to establish relations with the Europeans and to promote measures such as
en ese
education.
momento Nicaragua tenía impuesta
And at the time, Nicaragua
de la educación
Nicaragua
católica.
had an obligation to
No se podía
provide
practicar
Catholic
religión.
education.
Estaban prohibidas.
It was not possible to practice any other religion. All religions were forbidden. And if anyone died and they were not baptized, they would not go to the cemetery. They were not buried.
Llegó Zelaya, hizo una revolución,
Zelaya then arrived
hizo revolución. No solamente en el
and he
campo de
created
educación,
a revolution, not only in education,
llevando bienestar,
but
progreso,
also providing well-being and progress
desarrollo al
to the people, a certain level of development for the country,
contactándose con otras naciones,
and establishing also relations with other countries,
dando
trying
la construcción del canal por Nicaragua.
to build the Canada
Pero está la
through Nicaragua. But at the time, the Monroe Doctrine was still alive, and this Monroe Doctrine would not allow that countries would establish agreements with other countries, even if they were also imperialists, such as the Europeans, because they were entering their territories. They felt they were the owners of this territory.
Mandaron a poner bombas con unos gringos ahí,
So they ordered
a unos barcos.
to bomb some ships, to bombard some ships in Nicaragua,
Zelaya ordenó
and
que
Zelaya
los capturaran. Y los capturaron.
ordered their capture. They were captured, Cannon and Gross. Those were their names, Cannon and Gross. And the US government demanded that they were released because they were going to be executed. But the law was the law at the time. And a crime like that, for a crime like that, the punishment was execution. And Zelaya ordered their execution. Immediately, the note of the Secretary of State of the United States arrived. In this note, he communicated to Zelaya on behalf of the President of the United States that he had a specific period of time to leave office. And that they were already preparing the ships with American troops to go to Nicaragua and to occupy the country if he did not leave office. Zelaya was a man that didn't want to take on the challenge of that war, and he left office. But the liberal generals, headed by Benjamin Celedón, organized the defense of Nicaragua, and they confronted Yankee troops. There is a monument, a hill that is called the Coyotepe. That was the trench of Celedón with his troops. And the Americans sent high officers of their troops that cornered Celedón to ask him to surrender, that they were offering everything to him, everything that he wanted for his surrender. And he answered with a letter that he sent to his wife, where he said that due to the honor to his family and to the people, he would not surrender. That they needed to understand that his death was a duty before surrendering. And October 4th, on his birthday, he was killed. And the Yankees took him around the streets on a parade so that the people would be terrified and would stop their fight against them. And on the streets, there was a boy, a 14, 16-year-old, just a boy. He was not a politician, but he was very brave, and he loves his country, and his name was Sandino. Years later, he told that what he saw hurt him, the humiliation that was imposed against Nicaragua hurt him so much that he committed himself to fight against the Americans, and then Sandino's battle started.
So, since they couldn't defeat Sandino, they reached an agreement with the president. The troops withdrew, and they would sign other agreements to see how Sandino and his people will join the social productive life of the country. And Sandino's proposal was to organize rural cooperatives in all the areas. So the Yankee ambassador and the advisors, the military attaché, the army that they organized with Somoza, so the president says to Sandino, Sandino is still in the mountains, in the guerrilla warfare, and the generals of Sandino told him not to go. You shouldn't go because they are going to kill you. They want to kill you. And Sandino replied, our goal vis-a-vis the people was to expel the Yankees from Nicaragua. We have succeeded in this endeavor. Now, our fight is far more complex because we need to fight an enemy that the people are not seeing. Therefore, we need to take up the challenge to reach agreements so we can move forward in the fight against this enemy that the people are not seeing, because the troops were no longer fighting the Nicaraguan people. However, Sandino's general insisted that he shouldn't go, but in the end he decided to do that, to travel to Managua. He signed the first agreements and he came back to talk to the generals for the final decisions. Then he went back to Managua, and after the signing, the president invited Sandino to a dinner party in the president's house, and he went there accompanied by his generals. And the president invited to the dinner his son. The president was not surrendered to the gringos. However, this president did not have the strength to make sure that his decisions were complied with. He thought that Somoza was to comply with those agreements. So after the signing, when Sandino is leaving the presidential palace, well, in collusion with the Yankee ambassador, Somoza was there waiting for him. But days before, they were not sure that Sandino was going back to Managua. But when Sandino showed up, the first thing Somoza did was to embrace him, to hug him, calling him brother, Mason brothers. And the photo is there for history. It's a history record that Judas embraced just to make sure that Sandino believed that nothing bad was going to happen. But then they assassinated Sandino. And that's why I told Brother Ralph Gonsalves, that it is true that we could talk, but we need to be certain that when you talk to the Yankees, they always try to achieve their objectives, which is to destroy the revolution. That's the main objective.
Luego, ese periodo que nos narraba Nicolás,
So
golpe de Estado en
after the period Nicolas mentioned of coup d'etat, tyranny everywhere, and the Yankees dominating everywhere, they were the masters.
después, la revolución sandinista y luego la
The Sandinist
revolución bolivariana.
revolution occurred, and then the Bolivarian Revolution.
La revolución bolivariana era la
The
bomba
Bolivarian Revolution was the bombshell,
que hacía temblar ya el imperio.
and it made the empire tremble.
Estaba valiente,
The heroic and courageous Cuban Revolution
pero lógicamente un país
was
pequeño,
important, but it was still small
pequeño,
economy, small country,
ya sufriendo el bloqueo.
and under the pressure
La revolución
of the
bolivariana,
blockade. But the Bolivarian Revolution,
el comandante Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías,
led by Commander Hugo Chavez Frias,
una gran fuerza,
triumphant with a great
una explosión.
acceptance and great power.
Yo le comentaba a Nicolás un día,
And I told Nicholas once
la guerrilla,
that when we were in the guerrilla warfare,
estamos en la
we
guerrilla.
were victorious.
También habían guerrillas aquí en Venezuela.
There were also guerrilla fights here in Venezuela,
Era una gran fuerza, una fuerza
and
fuerte.
those guerrilla movement became very strong.
Y entonces decíamos nosotros,
And then we said,
porque habían guerrillas en Guatemala,
because there were guerrilla movement in Guatemala, Mexico, Brazil,
se dio la guerrilla del Che. En
the
Bolivia,
Che guerrilla movement in Bolivia, all over the region, we had guerrilla movements.
ninguna con la potencia de la guerrilla que se estaba instalando en Venezuela.
But none of them was as powerful as the guerrilla movement in Venezuela.
Nosotros decíamos,
And we used to say,
aquí la próxima victoria va a ser en Venezuela.
the next victory will be in Venezuela, a guerrilla victory. That's what we thought.
Eso sí que va a ser una fortaleza para
And we thought that
que se pueda
was a major push,
reproducir las victorias en América Latina.
so other victories could occur in the rest of the region.
Venezuela, con el ingenio,
Venezuela,
con la inteligencia, con
with
la
intelligence, the vision
de Chávez,
of Commander Chavez,
después del primer intento armado,
after the
del primer
first
intento armado para derrotar
attempt to overthrow
Yankees aquí en Venezuela.
the Yankees in Venezuela,
Bueno, dijo aquella frase famosa
he said that a very famous
y,
phrase,
y lo que dijo se hizo realidad.
for now, and this became a reality.
Bueno, irse por la vía electoral.
And they decided to go down the path of elections.
Sí, yo lo he dicho en Venezuela varias veces.
I've said this repeatedly in Venezuela
Del comandante Chávez,
when Chavez was alive, the eternal commander Hugo Chavez.
ustedes han logrado aquí
You have
romper la ley de la gravedad. Porque han hecho algo
broken the law of gravity here.
precedentes.
You've done something unprecedented in the region,
Chile triunfó la revolución, pero ahí
because in Chile there was a revolution, but that revolution was defeated, demolished soon after.
en Venezuela, la revolución triunfó
But
con
in
una
Venezuela, the revolution triumphed with a great victory.
la
In
votación
Chile,
era un poco más apretada y la derecha tenía mucha fuerza.
the right was very strong, and it was a tight election,
Ya no digamos
a tight victory.
económico. Aquí la victoria fue arrolladora.
On the contrary, in Venezuela, it was a overwhelming victory that not only generated a lot of joy in the Venezuelan people, but also the rest of the region was overjoyed by this victory of Chavez in Venezuela. Now, who could have imagined that such a victory would occur and would have thought that the Yankees would very quickly organize a coup d'etat against President Chavez? They were so hurt by the coup they received in Venezuela, a political, moral, economic powerhouse. They were so hurt that they quickly organized a coup against Chavez. But then you said every 11th of April has its 13th of April, and it happened. And Chavez came back victorious. And Chavez and Fidel together were thinking about the unity of our peoples, how to move forward in the struggle for unity. That is why we can today, we can easily understand the brutal coward reaction of government of Latin American countries, because I'm convinced that the great majority of the peasants, workers, the youth, they are with Nicolas Maduro and they are with the Bolivarian Revolution. However, the servile, the treacherous presidents, governments that have presented themselves as being revolutionary and the progressive parties and governments, well, they say that we have to have new elections in Venezuela. Brazil is saying so. Lula, I met him in Brazil after the victory. We went there to visit him as leader of the trade union movement with a lot of love.
Hacer lo que nos propone Ralph, que cree que eso se puede resolver
Lula thinks that this could be settled through dialogue.
Al que te pongan enfrente de dialogar, va a dialogar por los gringos.
Whoever
Los gringos jamás van a aceptar
is there to talk, that person will be always speaking on behalf of the gringos. They will never accept the win of the Bolivarian Revolution. After a commemoration of the revolution here, we invited Lula. And then we introduced Fidel,
Él, una personalidad con mucha fuerza, como
a strong personality.
dirigente de los trabajadores,
Lula has as leader of the
ya otro
workers,
del partido,
and then also organizing the party.
digamos, todo. Pero entiendo las
But
dificultades
I understand
que tiene.
the constraints Lula has.
Había un artículo ahí que dice que
There is an article
en su en la Cancillería y en otros lugares está lleno de derechistas
that says that in the foreign ministry of Brazil, there are only neoliberals and rightists. And these guys are willing to fight us.
Un día que fue a visitar al Papa, Lula,
Lula went to visit the Pope,
llamó y llamaron de la Cancillería
and the
brasileña
Brazilian foreign ministry
y le estaban pidiendo que él quería hablar, ¿ve? Conmigo, ¿ve? Porque tenía un mensaje del Papa, ¿ve?
they called us because Lula has a message from the Pope to us.
Si el Papa, que es un Estado
So
que está claramente a favor del imperio,
the Vatican is a state favoring the empire.
quiere comunicarse con nosotros, lo puede hacer.
If the Vatican wants to speak to us, there is no reason to use intermediaries.
¿Cómo se llama
They can talk to us
con el canciller Parolin? Ya varias pláticas se han tenido.
through the
Y se le habla
foreign minister Parolin. You could talk, and we are very clear. We've been very clear.
y Parolin pues escucha. Y ahí no necesitamos intermediarios.
So we really don't need intermediaries. We didn't ask Lula to be an intermediary between the Pope and us. So we didn't answer Lula until he was not happy.
Fue en una entrevista,
But then
entonces le preguntan,
in an interview, someone asked him,
¿por qué? El dictador fue que había sido revolucionario
that why the dictator, after being a revolutionary,
en otro Somoza.
has become another Somoza.
Le preguntan el periodista.
That was the question posed to Lula
Entonces,
by the journalist,
responde
and he answered
que efectivamente que él ya no es lo que fue antes.
he said that
Ahora es otro dictador.
he is no longer who he used to be. He is another dictator.
Entonces, ¿qué te podría decir Lula?
So
Ya que vos lo has hablado de esto,
what can you expect from Lula in this case?
¿vos cuántos periodos llevas ya de gobierno? Ya 2 periodos de gobierno.
He's been ruling for 2 terms now.
Es decir, parece que te gusta ser presidente. Y
So apparently you like to be president,
Brasil,
president of this
convertirte
great
en
country
representante de los yanquis en América Latina.
in the region. You would like to become the representative of the Yankees in the region.
Rompimos relaciones con
That's why we broke relations with Brazil.
serán una potencia,
It might be a powerful country,
pero
but
nosotros somos un país pequeñito,
we are a small country.
no tenemos la potencia de Brasil, ni la
We don't have
economía de Brasil, ni
the
conseguimos
power of the Brazilian economy,
tenemos algo que vale más que
but
todo eso,
we have something which is
defensa a nuestra
more worthy:
soberanía.
dignity and the defense
Y la
of our
manera en
sovereignty.
que se ha comportado Lula,
And Lula, the way you have behaved
gloria,
in relation to the legitimate president of Venezuela is a shame. Is a shame.
Repitiendo las consignas de los yanquis,
Repeating
de los
the very narrative of
de los
the gringos,
gobiernos
the
arrastrados de América Latina. Te está arrastrando también Lula.
United, the Europe of Europe,
Te está
and
arrastrando.
of the treasonous
Y no me
countries
digas
of
que
Latin
tus
America.
gestiones fueron extraordinarias.
And don't tell me
Fueron extraordinarias.
that your government
Campos, cuando fuiste
was
presidente por primera vez.
extraordinary.
Pero
I
recuerda
mean,
también
you had a good government the first time.
los escándalos, los lavallatos.
But
Acordate bien.
I remember also the Lavallato scandal, corruption scandals during your administration.
Gobierno, muy claro, muy limpio.
So we cannot say that your administration was very proper.
Podría mencionar
And
docenas de cosas más.
I can say many other
Si
things.
querés que te respete, respetame.
If you want my respect, you have to respect me. If you want the Bolivarian people to respect you, respect the victory of President Maduro
Andes ahí de arrastrado.
and stop dragging before the gringos.
A Petro, ¿qué le puedo decir a Petro?
Petro,
Petro,
poor Petro.
pobre Petro. Yo a Petro lo veo como compitiendo con Lula a ver quién va a ser el líder.
I think he's competing with Lula
América Latina.
to see who is going to represent the Yankees in Latin America. That's the way I see Petro.
Porque el pobre Petro no
Poor
tiene
Petro.
la fuerza que tiene
He doesn't have, of course, the power, the strength of Brazil.
el gigante de América Latina.
Brazil is no doubt the giant of Latin America.
Pero con ese gobierno que tiene de Lula,
But with Lula's administration,
era bueno.
he's not going to be
Goliat
a
quería
good
arrasar con David en América
country. It is going to become a Goliath
No lo va a poder hacer.
trying to overcome the region. But it will fail in this attempt to become a Goliath
Y
of the region.
quiero alertar
However,
a Nicolás.
I want to warn
Yo
Nicholas.
creo que ustedes ya eso lo tienen pensado, lo tienen analizado y
And I
están
guess
preparados.
you have already analyzed this and you are getting ready for this.
A ellos ya les fracasó esta maniobra.
This maneuver they have launched
No hay
has
vuelta
failed. There
No
is
hay
no
paso atrás.
way back.
Nicolás es el presidente
Nicholas
legítimo,
is the legitimate
continuador de la batalla de
president,
Chávez, y Chávez
continuing
de Bolívar.
the battle of Chavez, and Chavez is continuing the battle of Bolivar, and today Nicolas Maduro is wielding the sword of Bolivar. However,
Nicolás, que si a Nicaragua, un país que es una migajita,
if Nicaragua, which is a tiny
economía
land
pequeña, bien
with very small and fragile economy,
con países fronterizos donde hay bases militares,
we're border countries
Honduras
with
tiene bases militares yanquis,
military bases.
y en
Honduras
Costa Rica
has
están bases
a
militares yanquis.
military base, and Costa Rica also has a military base from the United States.
No pudieron evitar el
Since
triunfo de la revolución
they
en el 79.
were not able to foil the success of the revolution in 1976 after 40 years of Somoza domination, imperial domination, and millions of deaths.
¿Qué hicieron?
What did they do?
Organizaron
They organized
ejército mercenario
a mercenary army,
y vos sabés bien, Nicolás,
and you know very well, Nicolas,
estos mercenarios,
that mercenary army,
Petro no lo veo que lo vaya a alimentar.
I don't think Petro is going to succumb to the temptation to organize this military army. But in Colombia,
Mercenario,
you have the mercenaries.
el presidente ahí está Uribe.
Uribe is there.
Uribe, vos has escuchado a todos esos presidentes o expresidentes colombianos cómo se están pronunciando en
And you have heard
contra de la victoria.
how this former president, Colombian president, have been uttering their
Los militares
rejection to the legally elected government in Venezuela. And in Colombia, you have
no
Yankee military bases. So
porque el imperialismo hoy está más herido que nunca.
beware,
Victoria.
because this victory is hurting the empire more than ever. And there could be
Nosotros
an army,
1979-80, el triunfo de la
they could organize an army attack against Venezuela as they did with us. They paid for it, they armed it, they used the military bases they have in Honduras, and there was a long, a protracted battle, 10 years of war that we had to wage. 10 years of war with thousands of deaths, more than 50,000 victims as a result of that struggle. And in the end, we prevailed and we defeated this army of mercenaries. But in this case, the battle will be far more serious because the Colombian army, the Colombian mercenaries, the Colombian assassins, drug traffickers will be involved. And with this long front border that you have with Colombia, I think you need to be ready. Ready in order to wage this battle and defeat them. Because if that battle occurs, you are going to defeat them. And if that battle occurs, rest assured that we are going to have Sandinist fighters accompanying you in that battle. And rest assured that in the same fashion that thousands of combatants joined the Battle of Nicaragua against Somoza, well, thousands of Latin American, Caribbean combatants will join the Venezuelan, the Bolivarian revolution to defend this revolution. And I'd like to close, Nicolas. I think I was longer than I used to be, but I'm going to close.
Vigente. Este fue la primera cumbre de La Habana.
In the first summit of Havana in 2004, December. In that summit, at the end of the declaration, It said, we agree that the Bolivarian alternative for the Americas, ALBA, proposed by Hugo Chavez Frias on the occasion of the third summit of heads of state and government of the Association of Caribbean States, held in the Margarita Island, December 2001, laid down the foundations of the true Latin American and Caribbean integration premised on justice, and we commit ourselves to fight together in order to make this a reality. Also, the principle guiding ALBA is the wide solidarity among Latin American and Caribbean countries that share the thought of Bolivar, Martí, Sucre, O'Higgins, San Martin, Hidalgo, Petion, Morazan, Sandino, and so many heroes without egotism and nationalist or resistive policies that deny the objective of building a greater homeland in Latin America as the dream of the heroes of our emancipation struggles. We therefore fully coincide that ALBA will not be a reality through mercantile interest based on pure profit to prejudice other countries. Only through a wide Americanist, Latin Americanist approach, making possible our countries to develop and being truly independent. Only this approach could enable us to build, as Bolivar wanted, the construction in the region, the largest state, less for the wealth than for the glory and liberty. And that Martí conceived as our America, different from the expansionist and imperialist appetite America.
Luego dice, ya concluyendo.
To conclude,
Concertación de posiciones en la esfera multilateral.
concert of positions in the multilateral sphere and in the negotiation processes of all kinds with countries and blocs of other regions, including the struggle for democratization and transparency in international organizations, particularly the United Nations and its bodies. In the year that we commemorate the 180th anniversary of the glorious victory of Ayacucho and the call to the Amphictionic Congress of Panama that tried to open the path toward a true process of integration of our countries. We express our conviction that now, finally, with the consolidation of the Bolivarian Revolution and the indisputable failure of the neoliberal policy imposed to our countries and the Latin American and Caribbean peoples, they are in the road towards their second and real independence, the resurgence of the Bolivarian alternative for our Americas, a proposal that Hugo Chavez Frias presented, subscribed in Havana, December 14th, 2004, Fidel Castro Ruz, President of the State Council of the Republic of Cuba, Hugo Chavez Frias. And what can I tell you? Fidel, Hugo, we will not fail you. We will continue with you, Nicolas.
Muchas gracias, comandante.
Thank you
presidente
very much, Commander President Daniel Ortega. Thank you to the people of Nicaragua.
quien luego se sumó, empezando el 2007,
Which
como
joined,
Frente de Fuerza Centroamericana
starting in 2007,
a
with a stream of Latin American, Central American forces to the
alternativa
alternative,
bolivariana
the
de
Bolivarian alternative for the
y
peoples.
luego completó su concepto en una alianza.
And then this concept was completed with an alliance, because we are an alliance, a Bolivarian alliance of the peoples, ALBA.
Que somos la fuerza vital de la Unión
We
de
are
América Latina y el Caribe.
the vital force for the unity of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Es un motor muy poderoso
It is a very powerful engine
para seguir perseverando en el camino
to
de la
continue
unión,
to persevere in the path toward unity and
para
diversity,
seguir perseverando en el camino de la
to
independencia
continue to persevere in the path toward independence and sovereignty, patriotism,
y de la
and
construcción
courage,
de cada
and in the
modelo
construction
que los pueblos decidan.
of each model decided by the
Nosotros hemos dicho,
peoples.
vamos por el camino del socialismo
We have said that we are on the road of Bolivarian
cristiano,
socialism, Christian, humanist socialism of the 21st century.
por ese camino vamos
And on that road,
y vamos por el camino de la unión de todas las fuerzas
we
de
are
América
walking
Latina y el Caribe.
towards the unity of the forces of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Y de esta arremetida
Behind the attack
contra la revolución bolivariana
against the Bolivarian Revolution,
uno
there
de
are
los objetivos es
targets,
destruir la
and
ciudad.
one of the targets is to destroy CELAC.
Tomen nota.
Take note of
Uno de los
this.
objetivos es destruir la
One
ciudad.
of the targets is to destroy CELAC.
Vamos por la CELAP.
They are coming
Y
for
tiene
CELAC.
adelante un grupo
And
de cobardes
they have a group of cowards, far-right countries, helping on this, with Novoa, Milei,
la calle Pau, que se llama.
the loser, La Calle Post.
Pasará al basural de la historia.
He will go to the trash bin of history. He is a failure.
Un grupo de Lima depauperado.
This is a very impoverished Lima group, a decadent Lima group,
Triste,
sad
risible.
and laughable.
Yo recuerdo, yo tenía por ahí el mapa.
I had a map,
El mapa de la arremetida
the map of the onslaughts of 2019, 2020. Here it is. I don't know if you can see it too well because we are live via Telesur for Latin America, the Caribbean, and the world, and we are via social media as well.
Mira,
Daniel, look at this.
Canadá,
Canada,
no, 2019.
this was in 2019.
De Canadá para abajo.
From Canada
Estados Unidos,
to the south, the US,
República Dominicana,
the Dominican Republic, Jamaica,
Guatemala,
Guatemala,
El Salvador,
El Salvador,
Honduras,
Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama,
Colombia, en toda la frontera
Colombia,
occidental,
and all the western border, Brazil in the southern border and past of the east part of the eastern border, then Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Wasifira,
y la sumaron al eje del mal
and they
satánico del grupo de Lima.
put it in the axis of evil of the Lima group. Then Paraguay,
La
Milei's
calle
Argentina,
Mayo,
La Calle Post, Uruguay,
el Chile del finado Sebastián Piñera,
Piñeras, Chile,
México, y
which
ahora
was completely destroyed in life, and now he has been forgotten.
invadir a Venezuela,
All of them
Colombia.
wanted to invade Venezuela from Colombia,
Todos ellos vinieron a invadir a Venezuela.
and they came to invade Venezuela from Colombia.
Bolsonaro preparó la invasión
And
de
Bolsonaro prepared the invasion from the south, and the Americans from Puerto Rico prepared ships that were sent on February 23rd. And what do? We obtained peace, so we won.
Seguiremos ganando con la paz.
And we will continue to win
Grupo de
with
Lima
peace.
tenía, como decía
That Lima group,
alguien por ahí,
as someone said,
el grupo de Lima llegó a tener miles de países.
the Lima group included thousands of countries at one point. A very
de la extrema derecha
tricky person would say, from the far right, from the mainstream fascism. But they did not resist a hard look. Those who tried to enter through the border of Colombia, they were criminals. They hired criminals of all around their country. They took them, they drugged them, and they tried to come in by force. And who stopped this? The unity of the people's power, military power, and police power. This is the guarantee of sovereignty and peace. Peace is our harbor. Peace is our destination. As the liberator said, peace is our great triumph. It has been, it is, and it will be. We have many friends in Colombia. Please don't say this. Many people love us in Colombia. Many, many people. A lot of people in Colombia. And there are a lot of Venezuelans in Colombia who love their country, who love the peace of Venezuela. Those who dare from Colombia to try and attack Venezuela, our friends will protect us. They will continue to protect us. So my greetings to our Colombian and Venezuelan friends protecting us from Colombia. Many people. And Daniel, they are willing to do anything to obtain peace, because the peace of Venezuela is the peace of Colombia and the peace of South America. That is why we are helping Colombia to build peace, and I will continue to help them. For example, people from the grassroots movements, we are the enablers of peace in the negotiations with the National Liberation Army. We work with some of the groups of the armed revolutionary forces in Colombia, the FARC. And at the time of Juan Manuel Santos, we helped a lot. Former President Santos would call me all the time. Right, Celia? She is the witness of all of this. Sometimes we were watching a movie at 2 a.m. because at that time you have to read a book or watch a movie or a show. And they would call us from Colombia, and it was Santos. He said, "Hello, Nicolas. Look, Nicolas, can you help me in the whatever issue, just to clear the way to peace? Help me, please, Nicolas." And I would say, well, whatever Colombia needs, I would help you, because this is the order that Chavez left for me. He initiated the process for the signature of the agreement, the peace agreement in Colombia. I concluded this agreement successfully, and never, not even with Santos and now with President Petro, I never used this microphone to talk about the war in Colombia, about the internal situation of Colombia, of the issues in Colombia. Never, I never did it, because we do not practice what is called in diplomatic terms the microphone diplomacy. So we do not practice political interventions in the affairs of other countries. We respect in a sacred manner the sovereignty of the states and countries. And we will continue to fight for peace in Colombia. And I know that Colombians and Venezuelans living in Colombia, we will continue to fight for peace, sovereignty in Venezuela. And I know this, I am in communication with them every single day. It is not 10 people, 20 people, it is thousands of people. So we have a very good group for the defense of peace and territorial integrity of Venezuela in that country and around the world, because wherever in the world where we have Venezuelans, they are defending Venezuela. They are defending the sovereignty and independence of Venezuela. Fortunately, there are many thousands of them, of Venezuelan migrants, who are willing to give everything for the respect of the independent sovereignty and the respect for the future of Venezuela. And we are waiting for you, brothers and sisters here in Venezuela. Be alert. Be alert. Keep an eye out for fascism, for terrorists. Keep an eye out for them and keep sending good information from abroad. Well, we already have our declaration, the solemn declaration of Alba. They are telling me that it has been approved, that it is a very complete declaration that includes all of the proposals during the debates. But before this, I would like to give the floor to Her Excellency, the Ambassador of our sister Republic of Honduras. Sons and daughters of the great Francisco Morazan, Scarlett Yvette Romero Tantarero. She brings greetings from Honduras. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much for attending this meeting.
Buenas tardes y
Good
buen provecho
afternoon.
a todos y todas.
Enjoy
Sagrados alimentos.
your meal,
Hoy
everyone.
en esta 11ª cumbre
Today, in
extraordinaria
these
realizada
12
por el Gobierno de la
summits
República Bolivariana
of heads of state and government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America,
11th para los compañeros
People's Trade
y
Treaty,
colegas
Alba-Tcp,
presentes y a través de este sistema
where everyone
remoto, los
present here
compañeros y
today,
colegas de Cuba,
and via Zoom, to our comrades of Cuba, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Dominica, Antigua, Barbuda,
Vicente y las Granadinas,
St. Vincent and the Grenadines,
Nieves,
St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada,
Lucía,
St. Lucia, Venezuela.
compañeros y compañeras, hoy todas
Brothers and
todas
sisters,
reunidas aquí. Un saludo fraterno.
greetings to all of
Nuestro
you,
querido compañero y hermano,
to our dear comrade and brother president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, host of this summit,
ministros,
heads of state and
hermanos y
prime
hermanas
ministers,
todas.
brothers and sisters.
En nombre de nuestro noble y
On
agradecido
behalf of
pueblo,
our noble
del
people
primer
of
gobierno
Honduras,
de
of the
resistencia
first government of
de parte de
popular
nuestra
resistance,
presidenta
on
y
behalf
servidora
of the
del
first
país Honduras,
woman president in the history of
Xiomara
our country,
Castro
it is
Sarmiento.
Xiomara Castro
Y en
Sarmiento.
nombre de un amigo
On behalf
entrañable de los pueblos,
of a very dear friend of the peoples of the world,
eterno
our
Manuel
eternal
Zelaya
president, Manuel Zelaya Rosales,
fraternal y revolucionario saludo.
receive a fraternal and revolutionary
Nuestra presidenta y el
embrace.
gobierno
On behalf of our president, her government, of our people, I would like to thank Alba for the special invitation today
que nos reúne
to
con
this
hermanos
summit
y
that gathers
hermanas
us
de la
with
gran
brothers and
Bolivia.
sisters of the greater homeland of Bolivar and
Hoy me
Morazan.
concede la oportunidad
Today, I
de
have the
ser
opportunity
embajadora
to be here as an ambassador and representative of the people and government of Honduras, but for the people and government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And in this occasion, before this extraordinary summit of heads of states and government of Alba-Tcp, we reaffirm our commitment to strengthen the ties of brotherhood and friendship and solidarity with the heroic peoples of Alba, based upon the principles and practices of international law, promoting human solidarity, respect for the self-determination of the peoples, non-intervention, and strengthening of peace and universal democracy. We will never tire to repeat, brothers and sisters, and to thank infinitely their support to the countries of Alba, which in the darkest times in which imperialist forces were united to destroy our constitution in Honduras, brave men such as our beloved and always remembered brother Hugo Chavez Frias, tireless comrades that at the time foreign minister and today the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, among many others, other men and women with unbreakable principles, men and women of the greater homeland, men and women who defended democracy at all costs and who demanded to stop the pillage, the murder, and promoted the restoration of the rule of law in our country, Honduras, and who permanently waged a struggle for the return of President Manuel Zelaya Rosales at the airport of Tegucigalpa at the border with Nicaragua, which was essential for the return of President Zelaya in the midst of so much repression at the time and during the struggle of popular resistance that emerged after the coup d'etat of 2009. Now we are here once again as observers and invited by ALBA, an association of countries that we love, respect, and admire. From our part, we can only leave one thing clear, that from the Republic of Honduras, we will always advocate and tirelessly defend the processes of each country. The self-determination of the people is necessary to move forward in the construction of democracies that we aspire to have. Real and genuine democracies that should always be a right for our Latin American countries and all around the world. Honduras knows and recognizes the democratic processes that the Venezuelan people has carried out in the past few years. A country that has carried out over 30 elections, if I'm not mistaken, in less than 25 years, and the electoral process of July 28 is not exception. We congratulate once again the constitutional president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, to whom we wish the greatest of successes to continue to build and leading the processes for change in favor of each and every one of the Venezuelan people. We are certain from Honduras that Commander Chavez is from eternity, happy from the men and women who continue to build and defend the dream of Bolivar, for which he fought so much. ALBA has been, is, and will continue to be a shield of hope, of unity, of strength, an alliance of brothers and sisters to whom Honduras will be eternally grateful. And as our president says, we will never forget, comrades, that we continue to be a resistance until victory forever we will prevail.
Gracias a Honduras.
Thank you very much, Honduras. Ambassador Scarlett Yvette Romero Cantarero, and to all of the peoples of our America. Unforgettable. The lessons that we have learned after the coup d'etat of June 28, 2009. And everything I learned from the courage of Mel Zelaya, his intelligence, his astuteness, and also his sense of humor in life. In the worst circumstances that he lived during the coup d'etat, prosecution against him and against the people of Honduras. A coup d'etat that was recognized by Hillary Clinton, that she directed. She had a second version in her autobiography, and she omitted that part. She had to delete that part because apparently she made a mistake by revealing it. But in her book, she recognized that she directed that coup d'etat in Honduras against the great leader, Mel Zelaya. And I learned a great deal from him. We went to Managua. We were there about 60 days in Managua, and From there, we did so many things. Then we went to the border, and Rosario remembers this, when we went to the border. And at the border, we tried to cross to Honduras, and they didn't stop us. And then we tried to go by plane, and they almost shut our plane down. And I remember that because it was on July 5th, the Independence Day of Venezuela. But when I went to the border, Chavez saved me. He called me and he saved my life. One of the many times he saved my life. He had an incredible sense of intuition. And well, I learned many things from Mel during those days of struggle. And all of that has been very useful for the struggle that we have waged here in Venezuela against fascism, against those demons, against these people. And indeed, Ambassador, with the election of July 28th, we already have 31 elections in 25 years of revolution. Presidential elections, local government elections, mayorship elections, National Assembly elections. We lost one of them. We had a minority in the National Assembly for 5 years. The opposition was conspiring, and they took advantage of this to say that president was Guaidó. We had 7 consultant referendum. I don't think there's any country in the world that has executed 7 referendum of different topics. The last one was about Guayana Esequiba on December last year. Out of those elections, we have won 29 of them. And I think of almost all of them, the opposition, the far right, has said that it's been a fraud. They only recognize the results when they win. If they win a local government, they say, well, yes, we recognize the local authorities, we recognize the results. They won in 2015 the National Assembly, and they were yelling, yes, we won the National Assembly. But they are very bad as opposition because they are terrible losers. But of course, if their master comes from the empire that gives them orders to destabilize during the electoral processes, of course, everything is worse. But we will continue on our constitutional path, defending peace, institutionality, the Constitution, the branches of public power, and the greatest power of all, the people's power. And we had 31 elections without including the 2 national consultations that we've had, such as the one that we had yesterday. And you saw this. I figure that you have a video in social media because we have delegations here from Egypt, Ghana, Tanzania, Zambia, Canada, a very big delegation from the United States of America, a very big delegation from Argentina, a very good delegation from Bolivia, a huge delegation from Brazil, Benvenuto, a delegation from Chile, Cuba, Ecuador, El Salvador, Panama, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, Spain, France, Greece, Italy, Norway, Portugal, Russia, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, among others. They have come here as overseers, amazing overseers for this consultation. So probably we would have 33 elections if we include these 2 consultations. And in the communal councils, we have 49,000 communal councils, direct democracies. They elect their spokespeople every 2 years. So democracy resides intransferably in the people. And this was written as such by Commander Hugo Chavez. Everything regarding our Constitution in Article 5, it was drafted by him. And then, as constituents, we approved it, and this was the only constitution that was voted for the people, by the people. Article 5, sovereignty resides intransferably in the people. So sovereignty cannot be taken from the people. The people own sovereignty. It is completely different from the bourgeois democracy, the liberal and representative democracy, the democracy of minorities. That was a very old concept, already overcome by humanity. It is exercised as is provided in the Constitution through the elections by the bodies exercising the public powers. The state's bodies come from popular sovereignty and they are subject to it. We are subject to sovereignty 24 hours a day, and it is exercised directly, as we did yesterday. The people's sovereignty is exercised directly. And I could add another comment to approve the declaration. We had the election of the National Assembly in 2020. Even during the pandemic, we were going through the worst of the pandemic. We had the election for local governments, mayorships, legislative councils in 2021. Then we had presidential election in 2024, and in 2025, we're going to have the biggest election, a mega election, because we are going to have the National Assembly election, congressmen and congresswomen, then the 23 local governors, and then 335 mayorships, 23 legislative councils, and 335 municipal councils. Imagine that. So in 2025, we will have yet another election. We will have campaign, new candidates for governors, for the National Assembly, and we are already preparing all of this. We are re-engineering our machinery. We are preparing the method that we're going to use, the candidates. We are already working on this. Those who are outside the Constitution and doesn't want to respect the public powers, well, as a head of state, as a revolutionary leader, I can say this. As a citizen exercising my right, I can say this. Those who don't recognize the electoral power, those who do not recognize the judicial power, those who do not recognize the powers of the state, those who don't respect the right to peace and the Constitution, by law, they will not be able to participate in the electoral processes, nor in 2025 or any other process. As simple as that. Those who understand don't need many words. So listen carefully, because the far right is trying to take a big sector of the opposition to destruction. They are taking them out of political life, of the constitutional political life, once again. So where are they going to go? Maybe Capriles, Ramos Salud, they will go to a hill, to a mountain, and live there. But I don't think they can do that. I don't know, maybe they will go to the Avila Mountain. Maybe they will endorse a second Guaido. Because I remember they would call Guaido Mr. President, but after Guaido failed, they completely threw him away. It was very quick. That's how they are. They are the club of backstabbing. When they meet, all the knives are clashing, and those who give their back, they are backstabbed.
Cuchillos escondidos.
So they are like a club of backstabbing.
Elecciones. Excelentísima embajadora.
So, Ambassador, we have
Nuestra querida
even more elections.
y admirada presidenta
You
Xiomara
can
Castro,
tell our dear and admired President Xiomara Castro and to our bigger brother,
Mel Zelaya,
Mel Zelaya,
que Venezuela
that Venezuela
elecciones,
will have
que esas
new elections,
van a salir muy bien.
and those elections will have very good results, and that we will continue to walk the path of peace, unity, and national dialogue. That is our destination. Thank you very much. And now we will proceed.
Mira, uno aprende tanto en estas cumbres, en estas
We
reuniones.
learn
Yo le
so much in
agradezco
this type of meetings, in these summits.
a primera- a los
I would like to
primeros
thank the
ministros,
presidents, the
a
prime
los
ministers,
cancilleres, a la canciller,
the ministers of foreign
Bolivia,
affairs
a todos nuestros hermanos
from Bolivia,
de la
from
patria grande.
all of the countries of the greater homeland. We are the core of the greater homeland.
Patriotismo, la
We are the
valentía,
core of patriotism, courage,
como decía el presidente
independence.
Daniel Ortega,
As President Daniel Ortega
la
said,
diferencia entre las dos
it is
Américas,
very clear the
la
difference between
imperial
the two Americas,
decadencia,
the imperial
América,
America in decadence and our America in the process of liberation, of permanent rebelliousness and construction of a new future as an alliance, because we are an alliance.
el permiso de
Here,
presente,
I have the statement.
voy a proceder
With
a
your
leer
permission, I will proceed to read this declaration
la cumbre extraordinaria de
of
jefes
the
de Estado
extraordinary
y de
summit
gobierno
of heads of state and government of Alba-Tcp, 11th
Caracas,
summit,
cuna de los libertadores,
Caracas, cradle of liberators,
26 de agosto
Monday,
de
August
2024.
26, 2024.
Nosotros,
We,
jefes de Estado y de
the heads
gobierno
of
de los
state and government of the member
pueblos
countries
de
of the
nuestra
Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America,
pueblos
People's Trade Treaty, Alba-Tcp,
fieles a los principios y valores
committed to the
fundamentales de
founding
solidaridad,
principles and values of
justicia
solidarity, social
y
justice,
cooperación,
and cooperation,
apegados a los propósitos y
in
principios
adherence to the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law,
reunidos el 26 de agosto del
meeting on August 26, 2024,
y así se decide.
decide as
Siendo
follows.
la hermana República Bolivariana de Venezuela,
Being the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, a founding member country of Alba-Tcp,
unionista,
a unionist project
dictador Simón Bolívar,
envisioned by liberator Simon Bolivar and the heroes
de las gestas
and
independentistas
heroines of the independence deeds of Latin America and the Caribbean,
y materializado por los comandantes
and realized by commanders
Chávez Frías,
Hugo Rafael
Fidel
Chavez Frias and Fidel Castro Ruz.
los países de esta gran alianza
The
reconocen
member countries of this trade alliance acknowledge that this kind our nation of our America is a sovereign and independent country
democráticos,
with high democratic standards
sagrada Constitución,
and in compliance with its sacred constitution, which organized presidential elections in accordance with the corresponding regulatory times. Throughout the years of growth of this great unionist and integrationist project, we have witnessed the work and leadership of President Nicolás Maduro Moros at the helm of this sister nation in the face of the fiercest onslaught of transnational powers, in the worst political, geopolitical, social, and economic conditions in the current world, in which some of our sister countries have been direct victims of imperialism, as well as witnesses to an unparalleled onslaught against the Venezuelan nation through over 930 unilateral, extortive, and illegal coercive measures aimed at strangling the Venezuelan economy and society. Therefore, we hereby strongly condemn any coup d'etat or attempted coup d'etat as they constitute the violent, illegal, and unconstitutional way that threatens democracy, peace, and life itself, as well as the destabilizing plans and actions promoted by foreign factors, which attempt to disregard the will of the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean expressed democratically and legitimately at the ballot box. We strongly repudiate the brutal communicational warfare, full of hatred, intolerance, discrimination, and contempt through social media, strategically aimed at the younger generations of the Venezuelan society, victims of disinformation and hyperinformation, to promote violence, vandalism, and barbarism. 3. Reject the attacks and acts of vandalism against people, public infrastructure, religious and national symbols representing the Venezuelan idiosyncrasy, which caused human and material losses in order to create an information matrix of chaos in a country where a historic election date was held in peace and democracy. 4. Denounce the disregard of the official results of the electoral process by a violent and fascist sector of the Venezuelan opposition that has openly requested interventionism and more sanctions for the country at the expense of the Venezuelan people in different occasions, and which had already shown signs of its coup intentions by not signing the agreement for the respect of the electoral results as promoted by the Venezuelan governing body, the National Electoral Council. 5. Demand the international community to respect the sovereignty, the self-determination, and the democratic will of the Venezuelan people. We regret the decision of some governments to question the electoral results in Venezuela and to promote discourses that do not reflect the reality of the country. It is essential that all states recognize the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs and work together to foster dialogue and constructive cooperation rather than fuel divisions. 6. Recognize, just a second. Recognize that Venezuela is a free, independent, democratic, and sovereign state that has its own institutions and laws to address its internal affairs. In this regard, we welcome the decision of the Electoral Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice to settle this electoral controversy in a worthy example of full exercise of sovereignty and thus guaranteeing peace and tranquility to the Venezuelan people. 7. Salute all the participants in the electoral contest who appeared before the Supreme Court of Justice to contribute to the peace and stability of the Venezuelan people, which is a sign of political maturity and active democracy in the sister nation. While we regret that some political actors who denounce alleged irregularities did not appear before the Supreme Court of Justice, failing to fulfill their commitment to the people as presidential candidates. 8. Congratulate the constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and his people who, with resilience and adherence to justice, have been able to defeat the attempted coup d'etat, and we reaffirm our commitment and unrestricted support to the constitutional, legitimate, and democratically elected government. 9. Reaffirm once again that Latin America and the Caribbean is a zone of peace. We demand the strict compliance with the obligation not to intervene, directly or indirectly, in the internal affairs of any other states, and to fully respect the inalienable rights of every state to choose its political, economic, social, and cultural system as an essential requirement to guarantee peaceful coexistence among nations, peace and stability in the region. We gather to defend today more than ever the sister Venezuelan people from the tentacles of fascism and to raise our voices to reject the interference, manipulation, and imperialist, colonialist, and coup intentions to seize our legitimate rights and resources, and which have caused so much harm to our peoples. Defending Venezuela is to defend the dream of unity and brotherhood of our heroes and peoples. Caracas, August 26, 2024. Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America. Approved. Let it be published and let it be fulfilled. These meetings are always enlightening. In yesterday's podcast, I was saying, and I ratify it today with this solemn declaration, this powerful declaration of Alba as the core for the unity of our America. We knew colonialism, our grandparents knew colonialism. And I always wonder, how can be called what the European empires did in Africa, Asia, and America? Humanism, Christianism, democracy, international law. That has only one name: genocide, colonialism, slavery. All the evils that gave rise to fascism, because those who want us as slaves and want to recolonize us are the heirs of the imperial elites who destroyed entire peoples in Asia, Africa, and America. We could say that fascism, neo-fascism, is the son of colonialism, of racism, and slavery. That is why all of the currents of the far right are called ultranationalist, and they prosecute migrants in Europe. They prosecute Venezuelan migrants in South America and beyond. They are anti-immigrants, as the slavers and colonizers were in our continents in the past. They saw hatred and disregard, and they want to destroy our culture. The objective of the new oligarchy of the technological empire of people such as Elon Musk, because we have to call them by their name, because behind all these plans is a man that has 6,000 satellites. He controls communication around the world. And he was trained in the ideology of apartheid in South Africa. And I said this in a TikTok. Please like my TikTok, also in Instagram. He was selling hot dogs in the streets of Pretoria. How did he end up being the biggest multimillionaire of the planet? He went to the United States, he became American, and now he is the owner of the new NASA, because now it's not NASA, it's SpaceX. It's a new NASA. NASA just failed in a project, and of course this has been programmed. NASA has to fail so that it doesn't exist as a state body anymore. Now it is going to be replaced by SpaceX. Do you ever ask yourself these questions? Who was behind Hitler? Mercedes-Benz, the great last names. Who was behind Mussolini? Also the great elites. Who financed, as President Daniel Ortega was saying, who financed Hitler, Mussolini? And then they went against the Spanish Republic. The greatest elites, the millionaires of the times, the owners of the capital and the industries of that time. Where did they find the money, the steel, the iron, the engines, the technology to build the war machinery for Hitler? Do a little research so you can know.
Hoy el mundo ha cambiado.
Today, the world has changed. Today, the great oligarchy of the technological empire of the US controls the internet, controls the social media,
Además, detrás está,
and behind all of this, we also find Zionism.
¿les cuadra la cuenta?
Do you see it now?
¿Ah? Imperio tecnológico, ideología nazi.
Technological empire with Nazi ideology. Zionism, Nazi ideology. Who are directing these wars? Zelensky against Russia, Zionist. Netanyahu against the Arab people of Palestine and against the Muslim peoples of the world, Zionism.
¿Y quién dirige, financia?
And who is directing, financing the attack against Venezuela? The same ones.
Pero si ellos son los mismos, nosotros también.
But if they're the same people, we are also the same people. We are the sons and daughter of Bolivar, and we have the sword of Bolivar with victory in every road from now on. Thank you very much to the peoples of Alba.
Y muy pronto nos vemos
And we will meet again very soon to continue to consolidate the road towards an America in peace,
y además
in
a
unity,
los 20 años del ALBA.
and
En los 20 años del ALBA,
for the 20th anniversary of Alba, in which we will give great news to the peoples of our America, to our beloved peoples.
presidente,
Thank you very much, presidents, prime ministers, until victory forever.
venceremos.
We will prevail.
Nos vemos. Gracias, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Y así concluye esta 11ª cumbre extraordinaria del Alba-Tcp. Por su amable asistencia y atención, muchas gracias. Ha concluido el acto.